How's it going, Star Seekers? My name's Gotcake, and in this review we're going to be taking a look at a first-person action game called Mask of Mists, where you play as a mercenary who has been hired to track down a missing Archmage. In the game you have to explore the area around where he was last seen to search for clues, solve puzzles, delve into dungeons and fight against various creatures from an alternative realm known as the Abyss. So the game kicks off with a bit of spiel about the missing Archmage, how you're going to get paid a triple fee for finding him, and how he's been researching the Infected Lands, a place where many battles were fought and the magic used during these has weakened the barrier against the Abyss, hence the monsters now plaguing the land. We begin the game by getting a bit of a feel for the controls. Now you actually move very quickly but turn about 3 pixels per second, so you're going to want to whack that sensitivity setting up a notch. Taking a bit of a walk around the intro area, we learn how to jump, which believe me can be a bit of a ball ache at times. I lost count of how many times I fell off ledges into acid pools. We also learn that A is our action button and it can be used to loot chests and pick up items, and some items like these cubes can be thrown using the R button. So this first area introduces us to the game's puzzle mechanics via a very simple puzzle where we collect these red statues and place them onto these pedestals. Now the game is cited as being an action adventure game, but it's more akin to a point and click adventure, as puzzling makes up the majority of the gameplay in Mask of Mists. As we move on from the first area, we discover where the Archmage has been holed up. And in the upstairs bedrooms we find a sword, whose use we'll get onto shortly, and a note on a scrap of paper which gives us our first puzzle hint. It informs us that we need to activate the runes which can be found downstairs in a particular order. And throughout the game we acquire quite a few different notes containing tips, which all get stored in our journal, accessible by hitting down on the D-pad. Now after activating these runes we open a passageway leading to the Archmage's workplace, but here we just find another note referring to a missing key and a recipe for an anti-rust potion and nothing more. So we're left with no indication of where to go next, and our goal, seen in the journal, just says find out what happened to the Archmage. Now this ambiguity and lack of direction is a defining feature of Mask of Mists. We eventually find our way to a portal known as the Gap, and here we find another note, which we assume was written by the Archmage, and it talks about activating 6 navigation stones to activate the portal. Though it's not explicitly stated, we also have to assume that the Archmage did this and disappeared through the portal, and so the only other instruction we get for the rest of the game, and our main objective, is to activate these 6 portals. There's almost zero storyline from this point onward, apart from the odd notes that we find, which basically only exist to provide us with hints to puzzles. So we crack on with wandering blindly through each area of the game in search of these navigation stones. The world is reasonably sized, but we don't get any sort of map to navigate through it, and this is quite an issue due to the fact that the environments all look very similar. Now there are a few defining features here and there, but generally above ground everything is green and floral. While this wouldn't normally be a problem if the game was structured so that we cleared one area then moved on to the next, in Mask of Mist there's no fast travel and you spend a hell of a lot of time just walking back and forth between areas as you gain new items such as an axe to chop down a tree or a shovel to dig something up. The lack of a map or any sort of journal means that you have to memorise every single location you visit, the points of interest in them and the places that you couldn't originally gain access to. I often found an item and was like, now where did I see that place I needed this thing for again? Now I consider myself to have a pretty good memory, especially when it comes to puzzles and games, but even I ended up wandering the land for about 20 minutes trying to remember the location of a particular wall that I could now blow up. So as stated, the main objective is to activate 6 navigation crystals, all of which are found in the game's dungeons. As is the case with the outside world, each dungeon in the game is visually identical, though the layouts change and new mechanics are introduced in each dungeon. Generally, the game's dungeons are linear in nature, and the puzzles within them are very simple. Some require us to activate a specific sequence of floor switches, sometimes requiring the use of cubes to hold them down, and others require us to smash crystals to open doors or find valves to lower pools of acid. Now I really didn't find anything particularly exciting about any of the game's dungeons, bar the odd enemies found in a few of the dungeon's rooms, and the final dungeon which actually introduced some interesting invisible wall mechanics. Now combat in the game really does seem to take a backseat to the puzzle solving and it's very basic. We get two types of weapons in the game, firstly a sword which we can swing with the R button and can find a few upgrades for along the way, and secondly a pistol fired by pressing the L button, and this has limited ammo though more can be found in chests or purchased from the tree shop. Taking damage from enemies reduces our life seen in the top left, but it can be restored by drinking a health potion which we can also find in chests or craft at alchemy stations once we find its recipe. Now there is in fact only 3 types of enemy in the game. The first of these are these miserable looking slime creatures who swipe at you when they get close enough. The second are ranged enemies that reminded me of Gonzo from the Muppets, and these spit purple goo which damages you and slows your movement speed to a crawl. And finally we have these really big angry looking mushroom men, who are actually the most pathetic enemy in the game. You simply need to hack at them as you strafe round them, whilst they try to big boot you but fail miserably. So personally I found that the majority of Mask of Mists felt like one big treasure hunt. As you search for items to gain access to new areas, search for scrolls to provide hints on solving the game's incredibly simple puzzles, bar that one damn obscure puzzle, and search for materials to craft various types of potions. Now these materials are also scattered throughout the game's world and must be harvested from plants and trees, but the thing is these don't respawn, so there's actually a limited number of them which ends up being just enough to craft the exact quantity of potions required to complete everything in the game. So if you want to do this, you'll just have to scour every nook and cranny of the world to locate them all. In addition to all of these things, there are also stone masks which can be found within dungeons and hidden throughout the world. Collecting all these will allow you to unlock the game's alternative ending, which in retrospect wasn't worth the effort. So in all, the game isn't terrible, it's just really not what I was expecting. The only thing I somewhat enjoyed was really putting my memory to the test, but even as an adult who's a fan of point and click adventures and challenging puzzle games, I struggled at times. This makes me wonder who the target audience actually is for Mask of Mists, as I think kids could handle the incredibly easy combat and general puzzle elements, but would likely be lost trying to work out where to go next at some points in the game. When it comes to the game's graphics, I'll say that they're okay. I like the bright colour palettes and stylised visuals, but there are some very noticeable transitions on objects from lower to higher texture resolutions, and the draw distance in the game isn't great. Audio wise, the game's sound effects are pretty generic, and its soundtrack consists of some pretty stock sounding fantasy music. One final thing I'll mention is the game's loading times, which are pretty significant, especially when transitioning from inside locations out to the main world, which trust me you'll be doing a lot. So now we come to rating the game. Now I rate games between 1 and 5 stars, with a shovelware stamp of approval awarded to the worst games on the eShop. This rating is based on my own personal opinion on what a game has to offer in terms of gameplay and value for money to potential buyers. And for a rating I'd give Mask of Mists 2 out of 5 stars. There's not a lot on offer in terms of storyline, the game's combat is weak, and the majority of puzzles are really overshadowed by the back and forth item scavenger hunt dynamics, which will push your memory to its limits. I really can't say that I'd recommend buying the game at full price, but if it's on sale and you feel like giving your brain a workout, it may be worth a play. You can get the game from the UK Switch eShop, currently with 20% pre-order discount for £10.79, or from the US eShop for $11.99. Alternatively, the game's also available on Steam. How's it going, Star Seekers? I hope you enjoyed this review of Mask of Mists, and if you did, hit that like button and drop your thoughts and opinions on the game in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for future Switch content and reviews, and jump onto the Star Seekers Discord to join its growing community. For now though, I just want to say thanks once again for watching, and until next time, game on.